It's the 1st of February, so it's the beginning of the trade war with the United States. Trump has announced that the tariffs are coming, 25% tariffs against Canada, 10 against China, and 25 against Mexico. The justification for the tariffs against Canada are because our border, he claims, is too porous and that fentanyl has come in. That is, of course, complete bullshit because it's been transported by Americans. It's an extremely small amount, and the obligation to police your border is your own country's obligation. Of course, we have a problem with fentanyl in Canada too, and fentanyl is as valuable for the drug trade in Canada as it is in the United States. So there is no flow of fentanyl. It's just bullshit, and it's retribution for the fact that Canada hasn't towed the line and gone to kiss the ring of Donald Trump. And despite the fact that our Prime Minister went to Mar-a-Lago to try and talk him out of it, quite reasonably, and has treated him with some degree of respect, as much as you would reasonably expect him to get, we see this as some sort of attack on Canada, and that's the only reason for it. So what will be the response? Well, remember what the tariffs are going to affect, okay? So we import a lot of energy to the United States. We have a trade deficit with the United States because we import a lot of energy to the United States. That energy is used by American households, American companies to produce products that we end up buying in Canada. So we buy manufactured products, manufactured in the United States, in Canada. So our response is going to be to go after those products. And of course, we're not going to allow just a 25% tariff across the board and a reduction for energy. We're going to increase the price of energy going to the United States to deal with that. We have huge border trade with respect to the manufacture of trucks mostly, but of American vehicles and vehicles that are sold in Canada and the US. We have right now significant tariffs against China to protect our car manufacturing industry in North America. Well, you can imagine that the Canadian government's going to look at dropping a bunch of those tariffs against U.S. or Chinese manufacturers. And the reason for that is because we've got to control inflation, and we're going to have to ensure that Canadians can buy cars at a reasonable price. And we will likely be putting tariffs against some vehicles manufactured in the United States that are manufactured in states that are supportive of Trump. You will also expect to see tariffs on food and probably liquor because we have great alcohol manufacturing, beer and spirits in Canada. We don't need to get Jack Daniels or Kentucky whiskey or anything like that. I can't imagine that the Canadian government is going to go heavy against California wine producers. And the reason for that is because California is not a jurisdiction that is supportive of Trump. But we will see tariffs certainly placed against and restrictions. I mean, Ontario and Alberta, everywhere across the country, British Columbia, we have our liquor control boards, and they can choose to buy from wherever they want, and they can just choose to not buy American products. So that will be one of the coordinated responses that we see with the provinces and the federal government. Who is this going to hurt in the end? Well, it's going to hurt some Canadian workers. There's no doubt about it. Canada is in a position to deal with that. That's not so much of a controversial thing. The controversial thing should be that it's going to hurt Americans because it's going to drive up the prices. We've talked about the increased costs of purportedly driving up prices with a carbon tax. Turns out that wasn't the case. It's been studied. But when we're talking about significant tariffs placed against energy, significant costs on the energy that the Americans are going to be consuming, still coming from Canada, it is going to hit their pocketbooks and it's going to hit them hard. And if you thought inflation was a problem in the last few years, just wait and see what happens in the United States. Now, what is going to happen to the economy as a whole? If anybody's paid attention to the history of tariffs and the history of trade, free trade is a great thing. It is very useful generally for competition in the marketplace. It increases productivity, it increases opportunity for companies and people who are dynamic. Yep, you will see some jobs leave to places where it's more inexpensive to manufacture. But overall, free trade works fairly well in a well-regulated market economy. Tariffs are, of course, the opposite of that. And the idea is to protect certain companies. But of course, those companies are competing in the overall marketplace. And when they're protected, they lose their competitive edge. They're no longer competing on a level playing field, and they tend to become lazy. They tend to become lousy. And if you want a good example of that, look at American cars in the 1970s and how Japan came along and was able to crush them because their cars were just so much more innovative. European cars, too, were so much more innovative. And it was because it was a fairly protected market. It was protected because it was difficult to manufacture big things and ship them. That's not the case anymore. China is the perfect example of that. China started manufacturing small things and got really good and got better than American manufacturers, more efficient, producing better quality products. Now they've moved on to cars. Pretty soon they're going to move on to full-size trucks, and America's going to lose their one big auto manufacturing industry, which is the production of things on a heavy chassis. So in the long term, this is going to be so damaging to the United States. And if you think about trust, okay, when Trump was elected the first time, we all thought this is an anomaly. And we thought if we can get through 4 years of this, we can continue as a world, like the outside world, dealing with the United States. We thought we can manage to get along for 4 years. We'll survive. He's under control enough, and he can't stack the courts too much, and there's only so much he can do at power with the states, that we can get through 4 years. Well, look, the Americans reelected him, and so there's no reason to have any trust in the United States going forward. As far as the world is concerned, we have to all look for other options than the United States. Europe is great. Europe is dynamic. Lots of things going on in Europe. This is going to boost Europe's economy when we have this trade war going on with the United States, because U.S. products are going to be shunned. U.S. technology is going to be shunned, and we're going to see competitors that are coming out internationally, and the rest of the world, we're going to get together. Canadians right now are feeling a significant sense of solidarity, recognizing that the enemy isn't, really other Canadians. We squabble over small things. Of course, there are Canadians who are traitors, Daniel Smith, but the enemy generally isn't within Canada. Unfortunately, the enemy right now is the United States, and I feel sorry for all of those Americans who were smart enough to not vote for Trump. I have absolutely no sympathy for Americans who did support Trump, because honestly, they should have known better. But this is the situation we're in. So we are now in a situation where the world is against America. The world is against the United States, and that's an unfortunate situation to be in, but that's what we're going to be in the next few years. And we're going to watch the American economy collapse, and all we've got to do, or the best that we can do, rather, is to protect ourselves in these times, and don't expect it to improve, because Trump or another Trump will be along in 4 years. They're going to use the apparatus of government to ensure that they maintain power for forever. This is the end of democracy federally in the United States, and probably state-wise too. That's going to come along. They're going to use the apparatus of power again to make sure that they install people that they want in the states. So we've only got a few years where it's even relatively sane, because the states can push back. But after that, America's gone. Write it off. America is gone. This is the end of it. And as a world, we just have to recognize the fact that this is no longer going to be a democracy, and we can't be fooled again. Okay, they elected Trump once. We thought it was an anomaly. It turns out this is what they want. This is unfortunately what we're dealing with. If you are an American and you're thinking about your lousy situation in the U.S., fighting back, honestly, is probably not the thing that's going to help you in the long run. It's morally the right thing to do, obviously. But I would also consider leaving, because it's not going to get better. It's not going to get better.